It's not that I'm muted. My microphone doesn't pick up. It's a little sad sometimes. Okay, can you guys hear me now? Quite clear? Okay, perfect. So React. This is the React workshop. So if you haven't already, please download Node. It's in the requirements or prerequisites in the Hacker's Guide. But please download Node and Visual Studio Code if you haven't. It's not going to take too long to download, but we're going to do something right in the beginning that takes a while, but we need Node to actually do it. And then I'll get started with the workshop in like 5 minutes max. Please download to participate in the workshop in React. Thank you, Daniel. Okay, so any of you like coming in now, like just if you haven't already downloaded Node, it doesn't matter what version you download. So you can download any version that you want. I would recommend the newest version, but some people recommend the long-term support version, the LTS one. It's up to you. I'm gonna type it in the chat just for those coming in like later that don't know what I'm saying. Can you briefly talk about how to integrate React with any project in any language? So sadly, there's no easy way to do it for every single project, for every project in any language. Sorry about the ambulance, but there's no like easy way to do that actually. React is actually only JavaScript, and by extension, it's also something called TypeScript. Like you can use TypeScript with it, and some people actually prefer TypeScript in React, but you can't just like integrate it with something like Java or any project. Like React is only specifically for web development, but there's like certain technologies and certain projects that can use React outside of web development. You could use something like React Native, which is for mobile development. But it doesn't like extend to like any project in any language. It's more like web projects. The skills will transfer to React Native. Okay, I'll get started in about 2 minutes. That way we get people to come in. My goal for this workshop for you guys is to get a React project up and running and actually understand how to edit your React project. That's like my goal. But I mean putting a React front end on a Python backend. Okay, so when you have any front end or backend, it doesn't actually, like the front end doesn't actually care what backend you have. So the front end will just like call the backend or call the endpoint, and it doesn't actually really care. The most thing that it doesn't care about, like the only thing that it might care about is that certain backends, when you return data, it looks a certain way. So that's not even like per language, but like per backend. Like even if you develop it in the same language, your backend like could return different data. So yeah, I was just about to say, to test the Node version, you can do node-v. And then it should tell you the version. Yeah, and like Daniel said, there's protocols to make sure front and backends will understand each other with minimal friction. And ideally, you want your front end to like not couple with whatever backend you're using. You want it to kind of be modular, so you can just exchange your backend and your front end wouldn't even know, because you don't want to change your front end if you're changing your backend. That's kind of like redundant. You want it to be like as modular as possible. Okay, so that's a great question. If you separate front end, backend, and working fine and local, so you have to deploy backend somewhere. And when you have a deployed backend, it has to be on a running server. Like you have to live deploy it. Unlike a front end, which you can just drop it in and it'll deploy like a static website. So when you deploy your backend, it's like you have to deploy it to a very like a specific URL. You have to deploy it, and when you do that, your front end now has to reference that URL. So you need to change your front end a little bit. You can't just use localhost for both. Now you need to like reference that one instead. So like deploying it's like a little different than just running on a local. Local is a little easier. You don't need to like change it with the URL and worry about deployment. Okay, so it's 11:05. You need a good source to deploy backend application. You could use like a cloud service. Cloud service make it really, really easy. Let me go to the slides. Okay. No, this is the JavaScript. Oh, this is the React slides. I don't know why it has the JavaScript thing. Okay. So let's get into it. Why React.js? So if you're in this workshop, I'm hoping that you have some familiarity like with JavaScript, HTML and CSS, like maybe you've been using it for a while, or you like attended the earlier workshops and you have some inkling of it, because it's going to be a little more higher order or higher complexity. Don't let that scare you. You can still attend and you can still get the core concepts of React.js. But when we're doing the code, it might confuse you while we're doing certain aspects. So that's just like a fair warning, but you can still take something from this workshop. So React.js is the most popular JavaScript framework. I actually have like a little graph over here that's going to explain it. And it's also something that's really modular, simple, really easy to use. And as well, it has a lot of features and open source libraries and frameworks that you can use inside of it. It's kind of like referencing what Daniel said earlier, that there's like specific libraries for each backend and front end. Same thing for React, but like there's probably like 3 different ones just for MongoDB that you can pick and choose from depending on which one you like. That being said, sometimes it's hard to choose, which is, I guess, one of the downsides, like ironic. But then you can just pick a random one in like the worst case scenario. Here's like 3 key components that I wanted to talk about, like higher order of why I choose React. So React has something called hooks, and that's a fishing hook or fishing rod to be specific. But React hooks are a little different. It doesn't nearly do the same functionality. What React hooks do, it allows your components to like manipulate data in a certain way, or actually do extended functionality of just rendering something in components. The second one I put is components, just because it's really important to realize that React is a component-based library. Sometimes people put like a bunch of their code in just like one file, and it's a really long file, and like they don't have any components, and they have a lot of copy and pasted code and stuff like that. And like you should definitely use components to break it down, simplify it, and make it more maintainable. Finally, I put flexibility and scalability and simplicity, but it's also scalable, but flexibility and simplicity. React.js has like one of the least amount of boilerplate code out of all the web frameworks. There's virtually none. There's just like one file with like 10 lines. And it's also really flexible in that you can change it, and you can actually just sometimes not even use React, and you can just use regular JavaScript that accesses the DOM directly if you need to do something very specific. Do we have we don't have like a moderator, so I have to like go back to the chat and like read sometimes. But is there anything besides Node we need to download? And to download VS Code. Yeah, it should be Node and VS Code. So React popularity is the green line. Vue is the blue, and Angular is the orange. So you can see React is like a clear winner. It starts at 0, so like it's a fair graph. And React, like this is in 2017, so it might be a little outdated, but React like blows it out of the water. That being said, Vue is actually a pretty popular one. Angular is like not as popular as either of them, like still. That's because Vue is actually pretty simple too. And I was saying earlier before the workshop that the skills in React transpire to mobile development with React Native. So the philosophy behind React is that you have a bunch of components, they fit together, and kind of like the cog machine, they all do their own parts and they're all reusable. As well as React also is minimalistic when you use it. So you get the React library, and to use something like routing or anything like that, you need to import other things to your React library or your React project. So you only get what you need more or less in the beginning. And then as you need more features, you kind of have to import them into your project to make your project slightly bigger. So I wanted to go over the folder structure because it might be intimidating when you start. But before we do that, I want to start a command. Hopefully everybody's had enough time to download. I want to start like running a command. That way we can start our React project before like it just takes way too long to even open it. So first thing you want to do is you want to open Visual Studio Code. And you want to open a new folder. Now you want this folder not to just be your desktop. This would be a big mistake because the React project has to generate some files. So you want to make a new folder and go in that folder. So I'll name it like a React beginning. So I'm in React beginning. And so I'm going to go to the terminal on the top and click new terminal. And I want to do the code, so start our React project. So I'm going to paste this in the chat, but you want to do npx.create React app. And then you want to put a period to do it in this folder that we're in, React beginning. You can name it something else. So if we put like test, it would make a subfolder named test. Let me paste that in the chat. Guys, the npx, now you're probably wondering, like, where does npx come? When you download Node, you get npm, Node, and npx. Now, I'm not going to go over too much because we have a Node workshop for that. That's not the purpose of this one, but once you type this in the terminal, you click enter, it should give you like a loading and it should do like a bunch of stuff, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so I want to take a second. npx is just for Windows, right? npm is Linux. That is actually incorrect. npx is for both of them. It's a legacy tool. So I have npm as well. But it's just a legacy tool to download certain projects. So you get both with both operating systems. Okay, I want to make sure everybody's like React project is like starting up. Mine looks really weird. My terminal like messed up. I don't know why. It's like copy and pasting the same thing. It shouldn't be doing that. You should look much nicer. It should look like one line. I think, I don't know. Now it's doing one line, but it acted really weird. What's the difference between both npm and npx? So I'm going to go over that in the Node workshop later today. But npm is Node Packaging Manager, and npx is like a legacy tool that's used to download someone else's project. So this is downloading like a template, while npm downloads like a library for you to use. So their purpose is a little different. npx doesn't only download templates, and the same thing with npm. But that's kind of like what we use them for, like short definition. Justin, so that sounds like, did you make a new folder and did you make sure to go inside of it and then you open a terminal, or did you open like Justin? That sounds like an issue with like which folder you're in. I'm not even on that drive. It might be an issue that your node and whatever you're doing is not on the same drive. That might be the issue, Justin. Can you repeat the first command you did? Sorry, I fell behind a little. There's no problem. I'll paste it in the chat again. I want you guys to get your project ready because this like might be the most confusing part. Yeah, it probably is that. Node is very, I've had some experience with it. Node is very dumb with the drives sometimes, like especially with external drives. Alex asks, cannot create a project because of naming conditions. Please choose a different project name. So that means you need to make your folder somewhere else. Wherever you're trying to make your folder, you're either naming your folder really weird, or like it has like a weird character in it, like a period. So you can't, you're like wherever you made this folder. So I made this folder. Let me just show you guys real quick. I'm going to right click and reveal in File Explorer. I made this folder in C drive users, ZachZ workshops or workspace ShellHacks, and then React beginning. If yours has like a period or like a weird character, like in any of these, then you just can't. Node doesn't like that, and or create React app doesn't like that. So you have to pick another. You have to pick another location. Unexpected identifier. Did you make sure to put a period right after? If you put like anything else, it might do an unexpected identifiers. If you do like those tildes, then it would do unexpected identifier. I think that's might be the error if that's what you put. How does it download React framework using this command? Like in Angular, we specifically say npm install Angular CLI. Yeah, and when in Angular you do Angular CLI, and then don't you use the CLI to make a new project? So it's kind of like that, except there's no official CLI for React. We just use npm and we use this command to start it. It takes a long time, especially depending on your internet, to download it. So there's not much we can do until it's downloaded for me and for everybody else. Is that npx required? Are there any alternatives? I couldn't name the folder with React in it. Oh, like the name can't have React in it? That might be possible. And it's just when you're creating, you can rename the folder afterwards. It's so weird. Is that npx command required? So it is required. Like there's no, you could search up alternatives to create React app. You can even do it yourself, but it's just like the easiest template version. But there's like, you definitely don't need to do it. For this workshop, I'm going to be using it just because like creating it ourselves is like too much for the workshop, not enough time and whatnot. Not enough time for me like do it and everybody like kind of smoothly get it, because this is like a pre-made template that's like tried and trusted and it'll work. Yeah, you can't use capital letters. You can only use lowercase letters in the folder that you have. Sorry about that, Justin. In npx, only React libraries can be imported or anything else. Yeah, npx does a bunch of stuff, like npx commands. Like npx does a lot of stuff, so you can execute. It has like an npx versus npm part, npx binary. There's like a bunch of stuff. But npx is just like a legacy tool. That's how I view it, at least, a legacy tool that not a lot of people use anymore, except when we're using the sub command create React app. Because what npx used to do is you used to be able to download packages that other people posted, and create React app was one developed by Facebook. Everybody liked it. It was like their tool and their template. So then you would just download their template and then you would start from there. So that's why it's been used. And like, there's no, like, you can't port it over to npm, because then like you would need to make a command line interface or something like that. And like, it just works so they don't touch a type thing. Okay. You can have the folder on your desktop. Just make sure that like it's not the desktop. Like you don't want your project to be in literally the desktop. Only not like, you can have it in like a subfolder on the desktop. So mine just finished, but I'll wait like until like 20, maybe like 23. Hopefully I'll ask if everybody's is done. But like, you can make it on the desktop, like a new folder, but you don't want to select the desktop as your folder, because then it's going to be like with all your desktop files and it's going to show up on your desktop. Is an issue if my user folder has a space in it? There is an issue if your user folder has a space in it. Sometimes it'll give you an error, sometimes it'll not. It's given me an error before. So I had a computer that with a user with a space in it, and I had to pick another one. I made a folder somewhere else. I forgot where, and I had to use that one instead. But if your user folder has a space in it, it might give you an error. Okay, so some people are saying done. Is there anybody still waiting though? If you're still waiting, I can wait like 5 more minutes. While we're waiting, I can actually continue the slides. A lot of people should be finishing up. Okay, so if we look at our project, we have these exact things I outlined in this screenshot right here. This is like the template. So I wanted to go over each part so you guys don't like get confused or get overwhelmed. The first part is the node modules folder. If you open this folder, it's going to have a lot in it. It's going to be gigantic. The scroll bar is gigantic. This is why it took so long to download. It holds all the dependencies and like frameworks or libraries, everything that your project needs. It holds that. It also holds the dependencies of your dependencies. So like you can even go on one of the files and it has a node modules folder by chance. Some of them do, some of them don't. It depends on how big they're, like this one has a node modules folder, which has its dependencies. So you have like node modules of all these dependencies that allow us to actually do our project. Okay. So the public folder. The public folder is like the only part that this React project doesn't like pre-process a bunch and make into a bunch of chunks and whatnot. What that means is whatever you put in here is what's going to be shown to the user. So let me go to the code. If I go in the public, it has like a fave icon, a logos, a manifest, and then a robots, and then also the index.html. So I'm just showing you guys this. You guys don't have to like go into it. I'm just like explaining. But this part, this body, this div is all shown to the user. This is sent to the user, right? But meanwhile, in the source, which I'll go over in a second, it's not directly sent to the user. It's like pre-processed and garbled up, and it wouldn't make sense if you opened it after it's done like compiling it to what it does. Also, while I'm here in the index, I want to state that like this div with ID root is what React grabs to start the React project. So everything is through this div with ID root. So every React thing that you do is going to be inside here. Okay. Finally, source. This is all of React's code. That's the best way to put it. So source has a bunch of JavaScript, CSS. SVG is just like it's a graphic, like a PNG. As all these like JS and CSS files mainly, it can have PNGs and stuff and SVGs, but it's just React's code and styling. So if I go into side, let's say app.js, this is React right here. This is some React code. This here is something that we call JSX. I'll type it in the chat. JSX, which is JavaScript XML. Okay, it looks like you're getting help from them too. Thank you guys for helping them. If you guys have any questions, like feel free to ask. But this right here, these brackets that looks like HTML, is called JSX, JavaScript XML. It's a little different. So it has like.
Sorry to interrupt. Sorry. Somebody's asking about hooks.
Yeah, I'll go over them. I'll go over them again soon. Oh yeah, I see it. Didn't quite understand the hooks. Yeah, I'll go over hooks, like an example of them soon, and then hopefully that'll like help you wrap your head around it more. Okay, so it's a little different from HTML, like class name and stuff, but this function, this app, when we export it way down here, this is our component. So we can even hover over it. It's like JSX element. It's a component. That's what it is. It's a React component. If we go to index.js, this is the boilerplate. This is the stuff that you're not going to change that much because it's like get element by root. It's like attaching your script, your React project to the actual website. That's what this file is doing. So you don't have to touch that much. You can like look at it, and I'll go over it in a little bit more soon. Okay. So after source, finally, in like the upper directory, there's package.json and package.lock.json, -lock.json. So package.json lists the dependencies, the commands, the name of your project, stuff like that. So if I go to the package.json, has the name, the version. Is this a private project or is it a public project? A list of dependencies that we already have when we did the template, some scripts that we can run. And then this is just some configuration, browser list. You don't really need to touch this stuff. The most important part is here's our list of dependencies and here's our list of scripts. Okay. I also didn't include in PowerPoint the git ignore and the readme. If you've used Git and GitHub before, this is related to Git and GitHub. So the README is something that you read to know the project. If you go to your README, you can actually like read a lot like about Create React App, how to use it, commands, stuff like that. We'll go in a little bit of that. Also, like it just has like a bunch of information: deployment, run build, all this information about Create React App just from getting the template. The git ignore has like some defaults, like you don't want to upload your installed dependencies. You want to upload this thing, your package.json. You want to upload the list of them. You want to give someone the list, but you don't want to give them like the package. The reason for that is Node modules is gigantic. That's why it took so long to download. So we don't want to upload it. It also includes like some other common folders and stuff that you just don't want to upload to the web if someone else is going to download your project. So that's git ignore. You don't need it. It's just for Git and GitHub. Hey, sorry, can you please explain the dependency of index.html root thing and what do we not want to upload? So I'll go over what do we not want to upload. So like this takes care of it for you if you have a Git project, but we don't want to upload node modules. That's like one of the things. We don't want to upload the final build. For node modules, if you guys remember, that's our installed dependencies. If we look inside of it, it's like all the dependencies. We can see that there's some Babel stuff, Babel. If we go to dependencies, we have Babel stuff. Well, they removed it directly from here, but like this is kind of masked in these things. So this stuff is our node modules. But if I gave you this list, you could download this stuff, or specifically npm can download it for us. So we don't want to actually upload the dependencies. We want to upload what to download. There's like the list to download dependencies. There's also like liability issues. Like if you do upload the node modules, now you're uploading someone else's code as your own. Can you please explain the dependency of index.html? Yeah. So index.html there's no like dependency, but this is specifically the DOM element that React hooks into. This is not relevant to the other hooks. Just to let you know, I'm just saying hook like it's grabbing onto this div. It's saying, okay, this div is like React's only connection to the web page, and you can see that in the index.js. It's like get element by ID root. So that's how these two connect. So you need this. If I delete this, we don't even have a React project. It won't load anything. Like in Java final build is jar. Okay, so that's a great question. In the README, it actually goes over the build process, and that's at the end of the web page. I just want to show it. So if you go to the README, it's like npm. Oh my gosh, I did not mean to open that. Okay, so if you go to the README, it's like npm run build. Exactly that. Once you run that, it's gonna make a build folder. So I could actually run it in the background just to show. It might take like a minute, but that's what we use to build it, and it's going to be in a build folder. It's not going to output one file. It's going to output like a folder. When you upload a website to a web page, like a deployment, it's going to have a bunch of folders and files. While uploading, okay, so to avoid it, we would add it to our .git ignore. So this is like everything we want Git to ignore, GitHub to ignore. And by default, they actually already put it in there for us, so we don't need to do anything. Yeah, git ignore. So my build already finished, so I could actually look in the build, and you can see index.html. I can actually open and reveal in File Explorer, open it, and it's the React web page. Now, because I'm not deploying it, it's going to give me some errors. It's like file not found, cores, all this stuff. That's because I have to actually deploy this still. I can't just open up this raw because it's a complex website. When deploying this build folder, yes, exactly. This build folder has to be deployed. if you have like a web server, if you do web servers, it's exactly the same as just a regular HTML, which is why it's not working if we just opened it like this. That being said, we don't build it every single time we want to test it. What we do to test it is npm start. And you guys can do this and it'll run in your browser. To get the build folder, we do npm run build. But again, if we do npm run build and we go in the build folder, you're not going to actually be able to see it. It's going to be like, hey, Corsair, all this stuff. You can search up some solutions. There are some solutions. But by default, we just can't see it because it's going to give us some errors because it's not a server. It's just one page. We need a deployed server. Like if we do npm start, which will deploy the server, and it'll give us this template page that it auto-generates. Okay. Okay, I think I went over all the questions. So let's continue. The public folder. Here's like a list of descriptions. I'm not going to go over all of it, but I'll like do like a quick rundown. The PNGs and ICO, the logo and the fave icons are just images. They're just the React image. If you open them, they're not that important. The manifest.json is to make a progressive web application, which I went over in the HTML and CSS workshop. A progressive web application is something that you can actually install. So just like a quick example is if I go to my desktop, this to-do app right here, if I open it, this is actually a website, which auto-logged me in, but this is actually a website that's a progressive web application, but it looked like an app and it acts like a desktop app. You can also install it on Mac and Android and iOS. So it's like super cool to do a progressive web application, and React makes that very possible. Finally, you have robots.txt, which is like telling your thing not to scrape it, stuff like that. You don't really have to touch it that much unless you're doing something with data or privacy concerns. Okay, so let me check for questions really quick. How will it take the node? Oh, so that's a great question. How will it take the node modules dependency when deploying? So when you do the build, it actually, let me go into the code. It actually makes this static, and it like makes these chunks and all this code. You open it and it's going to be like this one line of super long code. Now we don't have to actually write this here. We write it in our project that looks readable, but this holds all the node module dependencies that we need to deploy. If we had to send the whole thing, it would take forever to load. So it like breaks it down and it gets only what it needs. That being said, it's still like a really long file, really large. But like it doesn't send the whole node modules, but it sends what we need. I'm still in the X. How do I do that in Node? You do that in the terminal of VS Code. Yes, that exactly, Daniel. Terminal of VS Code, after you CD to appropriate folder. Yeah, exactly. You want to be in the parent, or you want to be in the actual folder of your project if you do a dot. So we could do npx create React app and then the name of a folder. Okay, so I want to make sure, like, is everybody seeing the React logo? Because this is the first step. When you're doing your hackathon project and you're trying to use React, you want to make sure that you actually see the website. You don't have to do build. You don't have to deploy it somewhere for your hackathon project. All you have to do is get a local demo running for your hackathon project. You don't want to go through the complexity of deploying when it's not going to improve the quality of your project. We don't have to run build, Jose. So he said after create React app, we run start and run build. We don't have to run build. We just have to run npm start. npm start starts app. npm run build builds app. The problem with npm run, I didn't do a space between them. But the problem with npm run build, and it builds the application, you still have to deploy it, which is a whole nother step. It's not just opening the file, and it's a little more complexities. So that's why I'm not going over building and deploying. Okay. So I think more or less most of the people have gotten like it open, which is really good. So let's go over the source file. Every CSS file is styling. We can add SCSS or Sass. If you're interested in like you're doing design, I would highly recommend like looking at SCSS or Sass. I'll type the name because it's a little confusing. SCSS. Every JS file is a JavaScript file using React, most likely. We don't have to have it using React, but they're most likely using React. Logo SVG is just React's logo. It's a image file. Index.js is the starting point. You're not going to touch it too much unless you've been doing React for a while. Your report web vitals just sends web vitals. You can actually delete it and remove the call to it, but it doesn't particularly matter. Setup test and app.test testing files for your React application. If you're doing a small project like a hackathon, you probably don't want to set up tests. It's probably going to take too much time out of your project, and you should just focus on creating your project and getting it working in your local development environment. Okay. So let me go back to the this npx create folder. Yeah, folder name, exactly. And we used a dot to do the folder name of like the current directory. And it's anonymous with project name. Okay. So are there any questions? I'm gonna go into like hooks and like JSX and stuff like that. When do we prefer SCSS over CSS? What additional functionality is offered? SCSS offers like nesting, more convoluted selectors, better animation, better variables, and it has all the features over CSS. Like all the features CSS has, SCSS includes and more. So if you're designing a heavy web page or you want to keep your code more organized, anything like that, SCSS is really, really useful. There's also, other than SCSS, there's something called style components. If you're interested in like design, you should also look into that. It allows you to style your components in React like a little more fluenter. And you can also like use SCSS in styled components. And like you can all do all this kind of crazy design stuff to make your life easier when you're designing. Okay. So let's go over like React code because we haven't really gone over it that much. Now's the time. So first things first, let's like make like a simple clicker that has like a what's it called, a account. So I'm going to go into the app.js and I'm going to delete everything in this return up to line 21, not the parentheses. So your app should just look like this. Okay, I just deleted everything. It looks like this. That's what I'm doing first. If you save it, it's going to say like failed to compile. It's going to give you an error, blah, 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 blah. Don't worry about it right now. We're going to add some stuff, of course. Okay, so we want to make a surrounding div that's going to be like the background. And then we want to make a h1 saying click the button. And we're going to make like a p tag that's like click the button. And then we'll include it here. We'll actually put like a number. So we'll put a number in curly braces. And the reason I'm doing this is because I'm going to change it a little later. I'm going to add clicked. Make it a little more user-friendly. Our H1 says click the button, clicked, and then it's going to say 1. Even though they haven't clicked it any amount, we're going to change 1 in a second. So where's the button? So we have to add a button. And let's do click me. If I go back to the React app, we see like a basic click the button, click, and click me button. Yeah, we're using JSX. But right now it's really simple. This means that it's, and whatever's inside is JavaScript. So I can do JavaScript like console.log. Hi. So this is the curly braces mean to use JavaScript instead. In this case, console.log is going to console log. If we do inspect console, it's going to say hi. So it doesn't actually display anything. That just means to escape to JavaScript. That's what those curly braces mean. Okay, so let's use a hook. This is like what I kind of wanted to like push into using hooks, and then I want to push into using components after this. So let's use a hook, which allows us to save how many times they clicked and change how many times they clicked. The reason we can't just do it up here is because then we'll run into issues where our component won't render and it won't update how many times they clicked. And we'll just like run into a bunch of issues because it's outside the function. So we should use hooks instead. So if I do constant clicked amount, set clicked amount equals use state. So use state is the hook we're using. I imported it automatically when I put use state. You guys, I'll actually copy and paste this. Yeah, it's just hooks, not webhooks, but it's React hooks. Like they just added this feature a couple years ago. So use state is the hook that we're specifically using. Use state, you input the default state. So they clicked a 0. It's gonna give us an array. Use state by default. I'll write some dummy code. You guys don't have to write this. Don't have to write. I'm just writing some dummy code, which I'll do like array. I'm just naming it array from use state 0. And basically what this line is doing, it's getting the array and it's saying the 0 index is clicked amount and the first index is set clicked amount. So it's like if we got the array, it returns an array, and then we said clicked amount equals array from use state 0, const set clicked amount equals array from use state 1. So it's called array destructuring, and we're just setting the 0 index and the first index. That's why it kind of looks alien. It's a feature of JavaScript, not of React. But it's the same thing as doing these 3 lines, but these 3 lines look ugly and hard to read. Is there any questions on that? Let me check really quick. Okay. So that's what we're doing with this hook. Now that we have these 2 variables, let's implement it. So we want to show the clicked amount, right? That's why I put 1. So if I go back to my web page, it says 0 now, which is because the default state's 0. What do I want to click the button? Well, nothing happens, right? We haven't actually added anything to this button. So let's make a function. We can either make a function like this or an arrow function. I'll make a function like this. So add 1 to amount. And I'll do the curly braces. And what this function will do is it'll call set clicked amount. And it'll do clicked amount plus 1. We want to call this function when our button's clicked. So we'll just say onClick. And we'll say the function name. It's pretty should be pretty easy to like read and follow along. Like that's one of the main benefits of React. So we made a function. We're just saying, okay, onClick, call this function. Okay. So let's refresh. We don't even have to refresh, but let's just click me. Every single time we click, we have a successful click, like a tick on our ticker. Are there any questions about like hooks so far? I wanted to go over another hook, but first I'm going to go over components.
And actually, could you go over states real quick if you haven't already?
Okay, yeah. So yeah, I didn't go over the concept of a state. So a state is like a variable that you hold and that you can change. So clicked amount is the variable that we can change, and we change it via set clicked amount. We cannot just say clicked amount equals 1. We can't do 1. In my code, I defined it as a constant. 2, it won't re-render my, sorry about the hiccups. It won't re-render my component. If I did this, my web page would not change it to 1. So I'll just show that as an example. So let me refresh. If I click it, nothing happens. It says even assignment to constant variable. So let's just say, for those of you familiar with JavaScript or constants and whatnot, let me just change it to let. Let's just like use a variable, like it can be anything, not constant. It doesn't change it at all. Even though we're just setting it, or we're setting equal to 1. We could even do plus equals 1. It doesn't change it. So our state isn't changing. What's happening is this variable is changing, but in actuality, our component doesn't even know that. It needs to know that to update the display. So we need to change our state with whatever state changing function it gives us. Hopefully that like explains state a little, like so you get like a better perspective of it. Thank you, Daniel, for pointing that out. So now our state's changing and it knows when our state changes so we can update the website. Okay. Again, if there's any question, guys, just drop them in the chat or in the Q&A. So let's go over components. I'll just make a list component. So I right click source to make a new file. I'll make a list item.js. This will just be like a literal list item. So function list item. And I'm just writing this out so you guys can copy it while I talk. And we want to export it as our default thing to export. Most of your components will have this type of structure. It'll have a function, whatever the name of the file, export default, and the same thing. This is our component. This is telling the outside world, okay, this is what we are. Because it doesn't know, if we write like 15 functions in here, if we have like a function, it doesn't know which one to actually say, okay, this is like the representative of this file. So our list item will literally have it as a list item, which is the li tag. We'll say, I am an item. Cool. It doesn't have much use, but let's implement it just so we see how components are used. So I'm going to remove this button implementation. You guys can like cut it, or I'll actually leave it up for a second so you guys can screenshot, and then I'll remove it. I'll give like 5 seconds, and then I'll remove it, and we're going to do like a component explanation. Okay, now I'm going to remove it. So instead of a div, we'll do a UL, which is unordered list. Then we're going to do like a list of our list items. We're going to have like a bunch of them. Well, how do we use them? We can do list item, and it'll auto import. You see on line 4, it auto imported it for us. And we can close it, and boom, we have a list item. If we copy paste this, we have item. But I only had to use list item. What we could also do is we can open up some curly braces. We can make like a new array. We can say like, I don't know, like I'll just give it like empty values for now. And we can like map over the array. And when we map over the array, we have to give it some function. In this function, instead of these curlies, I have to use parentheses. We don't have to, but we can just return a list item. But now 0, 0, 0, there's going to be 4 list items. We have the one from above, and we have the 0, 0, 0. So if you're familiar with JavaScript, I'm going to explain this map and everything in like 1 second. I just want to get it written down. But if you're familiar with JavaScript or any language in process and like general, this is exactly array. There's no funny business there. It's just 0, 0, 0. It's an array with 4 values of 0. Map says, okay, let me loop over the array and return something else. So we're looping over the array. This element goes to the first 0, then it's the second 0, then it's the third 0, then it's the fourth 0. And then it returns, instead of the zeros, it returns list items. So in essence, this resolves to an array of list items. Because an array of zeros graphically won't display what we want. We want an array of list items. So let me change this into like 0, 1, 2, 3. Which hasn't changed our website. There should be 5 of them because we have 4 in the loop and 1 up there. Let's actually pass the number to list item. So num equals, and then element. So num is a property of list item. Element is the value of num. Element is JavaScript, so we need to escape it in these brackets. Remember, when we do JSX, when we do all this, we need to escape JavaScript in the brackets. And now we have num as a property of list item. If we go back to lists, if we go back to like our website, nothing's changed because we're not using num. We need to use it in list item. How do we use properties in a component? This is our component. We're giving it properties. How do we use it in our implementation? Well, that's a thing called props. Props are the list of properties here, like inside the component here. So if I give this an ID, it's kind of like a prop. React automatically filters out IDs, classes, and stuff that you would regularly use. That way it doesn't show up in your props, but it's like a prop. It's the same type of concept. You have a key and you have a value. So
are props like parameters?
Props are exactly like parameters. So like this num is now like a thing inside props. So everything in here, all these parameters get like pushed inside one variable called props. And that's the variable you can use.
A mega parameter. Epic.
A mega parameter, exactly. Can you show list item? Yeah. Yeah. So like I was trying to communicate, props has all those parameters, those properties, and shoved inside of it. So let's take one out. We'll do the curly braces props dot num. Because remember, num was our key. We use that key to access the element. So before I view it, what do you guys think? Okay, let me zoom in. Is that better? That's
yeah.
Okay. Use app.js zoomed in, the zoomed in version. So what do you guys think is gonna like show up on the website? Because what we added was these props.num. The num is the elements is 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, or 0, 1, 2, 3. So what do you guys think is gonna show up? Like, can you guys predict? The list 0, 1, 2, 3. Almost. Prefix to each one is I am item. I'm item num. That one's close. It's going to show I am item for the first one because we didn't give this one a num. But then every single one with a num is going to have whatever it is. 0, 1, 2, 3. So just to remove the map example out of your mind for a second, num equals, it doesn't even have to be a number, right? Because we never said this is a number anywhere in our code. We just kind of named it num. We named it that. So we can say like, hey, I am Zach. Save it, go back, boom, it says, hey, I am Zach. Does that make sense to everybody? Do you guys have any questions about props, children, hooks? Hooks, the use state was just one hook. In React, there's many hooks and you can even create your own. The important thing to take away from what I was showing you guys is one, how to use state, or at least how to start using it. And two, that hooks are something that adds functionality to your components. Without them, our components are kind of plain. Like this component doesn't actually, it doesn't interact or anything. It can't actually do anything. It can't save state. So it doesn't know its past or it doesn't know its future. On line 11, it's blurry. Like after the return. Oh, it's a parenthesis. It's a parenthesis. This one's a parenthesis. Let me zoom in a little more. I don't know why it's so blurry. I don't know if it's like hopping. I increase the quality.
So if you were to send data from a backend to the front end, where would you manipulate that data? Where would it be received? Like, how would you accept it, for example?
That's a great question. If we were to manipulate data, we would have to save it somewhere, and we'd also have to like call it only once. We don't want to like continuously call it. In both of those cases, we would use a hook. If you search up data fetching with React, you'll see that they use state. Hopefully, when you guys search that up, if you're using data fetching in your projects, you search up how to get data fetching in React. You see the use state. Hopefully, you have more of what it's talking about, as well as it's going to use like other hooks like use effect and stuff like that. I mean, before /ul. Oh yeah, here you go. It's a curly parentheses curly. So this curly is the ending one. Then this parenthesis is here, and then this curly is that third one. No problem. Okay. Do you guys have any questions about React? Hopefully you guys are like more prepared when you guys are like researching stuff for your hackathon, you know, like how to start the project. Like that's the main goal that we want to take from this workshop. Hooks, components, props, stuff like that.
Awesome job, Zach. Woo-hoo! Can I get a poggers in the chat for Zach? Fantastic job.
Thank you guys all for coming. Oh, is that what you said? I thought you said Panthers. Thank you guys all for coming to the workshop. And I hope you guys have like an amazing hackathon. The ShellHacks has been really good so far. It's been like really interactive. I really love the audience this year. So yeah, just thank you guys for coming. And hopefully I see you guys soon.
Awesome. All right, I'll see y'all later. Have a good one, guys.